Spring has sprung in the southeast, leaves are out, temperatures are warming, and the thunderstorms have come about. What's next as we move through this transitional period and on into summer? Jeff, Chris, and I will touch on many of these things in the April Earth Day edition of the Water Resources Outlook. Jeff will get us started with some climatology.
So going back and looking at a precipitation perspective over the last 6 months, we see the very wet late fall and early winter we had in most of the southeast led into a late winter and early spring that has been pretty much closer to normal. In fact, we have been a bit dry across parts of the Carolinas in some of those areas that had seen record wet weather in the fall. The past 30 days has contributed to the dry weather. As you can see here, we have been 2 to 3 inches below normal for the past 30 days across most of the southern Appalachian Mountains. As you can see there in the orange-colored areas, with at least an inch below normal in most of the remaining areas of the Carolinas. The Gulf Coast has been a bit of a different story, with much above normal rainfall with wet weather at the beginning of the month of April and another storm system around the middle of the month. This is the area that has been the focus of flooding this spring as well. And talking about flooding, let's take a look at our river flood climatology. And we see here we are typically where we are typically around this time of year. We see that that we are around week 16 and are typically coming out of our peak flood period. Over the next several weeks, we see river flooding chances decrease as the jet stream seems to shift a little farther north and the frequency of storm systems becomes less and less. So we're going into a quieter river flood period, and this generally lasts well into the summer. But as we have said in the past, Central Florida river basins are a little different. River flooding is very uncommon this time of year, and this is the case through most of the May period until the convective season in June ramps up the rainfall, and this lasts through the summer in the early fall with the potential of tropical systems as well. So how are the stream flows doing? Taking a look at the U.S. Geological Survey's 14-day stream flows, we see most of the areas are near normal, but we are seeing some flows across the Carolinas now falling into the below normal stream flow range across parts of Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. With wetter weather the past few weeks, some gauges reporting actually above normal stream flows, so quite a mix across the southeast. And with those lower stream flows, we see the drought monitor now depicting abnormally dry conditions across about a third of the southeast, mainly across the Carolinas, in line with the recent precipitation deficits that were shown in the previous slide. We will continue to monitor the drought conditions and the dry conditions and see if any of the areas fall into the moderate drought category.
All right, let's take a look at what we can expect for the next week or so across the southeast U.S. We're beginning the period with a cold front moving eastward across the area, and as we get into this weekend, we're going to see high pressure build in behind the departing front and skies clearing. We'll see a return to precipitation as we go into the midterm period where we have another front approach the area. It looks like it'll waffle around a bit during the week, but what this means is chances are we'll have higher chances for precipitation across the northern portion of the area. So Virginia, the Carolinas, and then the northern portions of Georgia and Alabama. Looking at the 7-day precipitation forecast, we see this is mainly based on what we're receiving early in the short-term period as that cold front moves through the region. But we also see contributions from the midterm period in the northern portion of the area. Looking at the long-term outlook, we're expecting above normal precipitation amounts across a portion of the area based on what the models are showing as we get into early May.
We continue to look at the ENSO conditions because they have played such a large role in our weather this past winter and will likely play a factor in our chances in the coming year. As temperatures drop in the equatorial Pacific, we are quickly moving out of El Nino and into more neutral conditions. Temperatures are still warm enough to be an El Nino, but we are now more in a springtime pattern that doesn't have as much effect on the weather because of those ENSO conditions. It does seem as though we move very quickly into La Nina, and as we look at our seasonal forecast from the Climate Prediction Center in a moment, those forecasts do factor in the ENSO conditions. Even though Chris hinted at early May dryness in Florida and only a hint of wetter conditions across the southeast, the monthly forecast from CPC nudges us in the wetter category. This could be a last gasp by the models keeping wetness in the areas because of El Nino. It does sort of go against what we have been seeing in the Carolinas, with drying being the rule this winter and spring. However, with the jet stream creeping to the north as we approach summer, the Carolinas could become more active and interesting through the month of May. The May forecast does have an impact on the seasonal forecast, so we are leaning towards a wetter late spring. Seems that in the southeast, if we have a wet May and early June, there's moisture to work with as summer temperatures take over, and voila, we have more pop-up thunderstorms in the area as we head into summer. So a lot is riding on the wet forecast for May. If a wet May does not materialize, it would impact that early summer in the opposite way, with more normal conditions and maybe a little drier conditions. From that point, CPC shows equal chances for above, near, or below normal precipitation for the rest of the summer until we get to the August to October seasonal forecast, where it leans towards wet. This may very well be because La Nina years tend to have more tropical activity and therefore a bit higher chances at the end of the summer and early fall for some wet weather across the southeast. And then La Nina takes over, and dryness is on the docket for late fall and most of the winter. This is not unexpected, but could change in the coming months if the La Nina conditions don't pan out like we are currently expecting them to do. So the bottom line, in the short term, it's really kind of typical spring weather, where we have hit and miss for the rainfall because of showers and thunderstorms that move through the southeast. And as our jet stream starts to creep to the north, the rainfall will tend to move to the north and maybe impact the Carolinas and Virginia a little bit more. They could use some of that rainfall. But flooding is less likely just due to the competition for the water. With leaves on the trees and a lot of foliage out there, they need some of that water too. And so when we do get rainfall, it uses that, and not as much probably gets down to the rivers. And so we do need more rainfall as we move into summer to get some of the flooding like we saw during the winter. As for the long term, transitions. We're in a transitional period in a couple different ways. One is the El Nino to La Nina, and you saw that it's moving pretty quickly, and possibly by the end of summer we'll have gone from El Nino to La Nina. And so that will impact the weather, as we talked about before. And then we're moving right now from spring into summer, and that kind of shifts where the heavy rain goes as we go into the wet season down in Florida, and we kind of shift out where we have more deficits just based on normal rainfall in the southeast. So thank you for listening to the Earth Day edition of the Water Resources Outlook. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us, either Todd or me, Jeff or Chris, and we will get back to you as quickly as we can. We'll have our next Water Resources Outlook sometime about the third week of May. Thank you very much for listening.